I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I mean, I'm sober now, so I don't care about talking about my drug use. I was sitting on a beach smoking cocaine cigarettes, and hence Peruco Pachuca Sunrise. We just got the name wrong, and then we're like, whatever, fuck it, it's Pachuca, who cares?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to support the podcast, you can go over to my Patreon, patreon.com/thiswasthescene. It's only $1 a month, which is $12 a year, which is about 2.5 Starbucks coffees that you'd be giving up in the year. 2.5 Starbucks coffees in the entire fucking year. So if you want to support it, that'd be great. Helps keep the lights on and things like that. Menos the Bear was an American indie rock band formed in Seattle, Washington in 2001. They comprised of members of Botch, Kill Sadie, and Sharks Keep Moving. Their sound was described as Pele-esque guitar taps and electronics with sophisticated time signature composition. They released 6 albums and 4 EPs. On July 17, 2018, the band announced their retirement and accompanying farewell tour. Their final live performance was December 16, 2018 at the Showbox in Seattle. 2 things I want to point out in the interview. One, I asked Erin about a band they toured with when I saw them play in the Planet of Ice tour. He says it was Murder by Death, but after researching who that band is, I can say that it was not them, but it's some other band that I just can't remember. Secondly, I asked if he played with Piebald, like in the band, and what I actually saw online was a video of Erin on Piebald's Facebook page, and the headline read, "Here is Erin David Tate, Menos the Bear 2001-2015, sharing his experience touring with Piebald 20 years ago." I just took that as he was in the band, so that was dumb. I just figured I'd clarify that. I've been wanting to talk to someone from this band for a long time, and luckily Erin said yes, and this is what we chat about. Kill Sadie, forming Menos the Bear, Menos El Oso, Planet of Ice, recording Omni, partying with Braid, Animal Backwards, the video for My Time, getting sober, it's a solid listen for anyone out there who's struggling with drinking, getting kicked out of the band, and a ton more. You can check out some of his new projects. He's in Lil Lebowski, Ghostwork, and he's the organizer of the Indie Drum Collective. All of them are in the show notes. They're just links to the Instagram pages. Lastly, the holidays are coming up, so if you're looking for a gift for someone, you might want to check out my merch store. It's thiswasthescene.com/shop, and there's a bunch of stuff in there, especially like my favorite is the mug that says, "It's Taylor Ham, you fuck." That's for people from New Jersey who say pork roll because they're wrong. And a bunch of other goodies in there, so if you want to go check it out, that'd be awesome. Again, it's another way to support the podcast. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. I saw you just did an interview recently. Are you kind of, I don't know, making the rounds and trying to talk to people?
No, it was just totally rare or weird coincidence that it happened at the same time. I don't think that one's going to post for like 2 weeks.
There was a video one, right?
Yeah, we did it the other day, but it doesn't post for a little while. The way he made it sound, I was like, is this fucking live? I thought it was like live that day or something, but then he was like, oh yeah, it doesn't actually post for a couple weeks, so don't date yourself at all. I'm not. Just post Menos the Bear. I just haven't really wanted to do interviews for a long time. And after like 5-6 years, I just didn't really feel like I would do anything unless I had something to actually promote. And so 2 different people a few years ago talked me into doing interviews solely for the Indie Drummer Collective thing that I run. And we talked about Menos the Bear as well, but like I was trying to promote that essentially. But now I have a new band and I got tons of shit going on. So why the hell not?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, this is really going to be focused on Menos the Bear. Is that cool? That I'm just going to...
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, cool. I know some people just want to be like, yeah, just leave the past, but...
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I was expecting the interview that I did the other day to be way more about that, but we like barely talked about Menos the Bear, and it was mostly about the new band and the drummer collective, so...
Oh, cool. All right, sweet then. This podcast was focused on the late 90s, early 2000s, and it just branched out from there. Because it was really just based on the Jersey scene when I started, people were like, oh, do you want to talk to this person? And then I started to. And then recently, I was like, I'm going to kind of teeter the line here. I mean, technically you guys started in 2001, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that totally falls in the criteria. I mean, there's bands that I love now. I'm branching out where they'll start in like 2008, let's say, but I just really want to interview them. With this, I was like, I just fucking love Menos the Bear. Like, I mean, I've been listening to it since I got into it with fucking Menos came out. That's the way you say that, right?
Menos, so yeah.
Menos, yeah. Yeah, and then because I was in Newberry Comics in Boston when in like 2005 or something like that, and also in Pachuca. So I always say Pachuca Sunrise. Is that right?
Yeah.
That comes on, and I go up to the counter. I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Man Minus the Bear." I'm like, "I'm buying this right now." I just fell in love with you guys since. So I've been like collecting your albums for years and stuff. So I'm really stoked. I'm not gonna like geek out and shit and become like crazy, but I just wanted to just lead with that.
I totally appreciate it, man. Like I've hit this thing pretty recently in my life where like I'm trying to I've spent the last 8-9 years kind of in hiding to some degree as far as the music scene. I've played in some bands and stuff, but it wasn't the best ending of the band for me. And so I spent a lot of years just trying to really like kind of recover from all of that. It was pretty traumatic. And I'm really just trying to embrace the fact now that people enjoyed it. Something I did 10 years ago, people enjoyed. That's a good thing. I'm just trying to mentally switch my game around and just embrace the fact that, I did something in my life musically that people really enjoyed. And that's not a bad thing.
Well, it's one of those things where some bands I'll just like the vocalist or I'll like maybe one part or just the songs they have. For some reason with you guys, I loved like every single thing each one of you did. Like you as a drummer, I think you're fucking amazing. So I really want to preface that too because it's not like, all right, I want to just talk about the songs and things. Like your drumming was one of the reasons why I loved the band. So I did want to state that.
Oh, thanks, man. That's really sweet of you to say.
I thought everything you guys did was just this cohesive, awesome thing. So what I usually do is kind of start off with, the origins of the band, how it starts, and just kind of talk through just the progression with records and labels and tours and just really live in that whole space. But the way I always started off is ask this question. I'm like, so how did you personally get involved in the punk scene?
So I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was born in St. Paul, but I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there's a fairly large punk scene there. But I have a brother who is 4 years older than me, and my brother really helped take care of me when I was younger. He, God, was probably 13, 14, and I was probably maybe even young, 8 or 9 or 10. He had gotten a guitar, and then his best friend Phil got a bass, and they just told me that I had to play drums. So I learned that way, and it was all over the place. My brother and I definitely listened to I was born in '78 and he was born in '74, so it was definitely at first a lot of hair metal growing up. Guns N' Roses and all that stuff was definitely my jam. And then the idea of more underground music. There was a band from Mankato, Minnesota called the Libido Boys. That I'm actually in a band with the bass player of that band now, Dustin Perry, who plays in the band Snapcase as well now. But Dustin was in a band called Libido Boys, and then he went on to be in a band called Threadbare. But I would say the Libido Boys absolutely were like my introduction to kind of punk. And then it just spawned from there. It rolled on. My brother and I kind of transferred through a lot of different genres of music together. We played music together from the time that I started playing, which again, maybe 10 years old, I'm not sure exactly, until I moved to Seattle, actually. I had never been in a band before without my brother. Minus the Bear was the first band that I was ever in without my brother.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I saw you were in These Arms Are Snakes, A Skeleton?
Yeah, so A Skeleton is my brother. I went home. The first time that I ever went back to Seattle, my brother needed some drum tracking, so I just did some drum tracking for him. And then I recorded and did one small tour with These Arms Are Snakes. I was just helping them write a record, which was actually at the exact same time as writing Menos. All
right, so you moved to Seattle. What made you move there? Just like parents get a job or something like that, or?
No, my brother and I we were in a band called Kill Sadie together, small hardcore punk band, kind of weird shit. It started off as kind of my brother and I, the influences we had when we were writing the first batch of songs. And again, I was young, maybe, I don't even know if I had graduated high school. We were really influenced by the band Lifetime from New Jersey, and then the band Ink and Dagger from Philadelphia. I would say our first EP sounds like a cross between the two of those. But then it evolved. Kill Sadie started touring right when I got done with high school. We all knew right away that was what we wanted to do. We went through so many members. It was kind of ridiculous. But we hit a point where we were like, we want to move out of, we want to do this. We want to do this for what we do for our lives. We want to tour and play music. We didn't really feel like we could do that in Minnesota. So we plotted out like 2 really huge tours, like back to back. And one of them was the East Coast to the South and back up through Minnesota, and then The other one was the West Coast, and we would figure out. We tried to go every state. We didn't end up going every state, but it was a few months of touring, and we were actually all really set on Philadelphia. When we hit Seattle, it was within hours, I think, of being here. We all were like, yep, okay, we're moving here.
And this was what year? What year was that?
That would be November of '98, and I moved here. I moved here first out of the group for like a month first, which would be March of '99. So the rest of the group came out. We all lived here. We toured. We started kind of incorporating ourselves into the Seattle scene, which is how I met the Minus the Bear guys.
How was the scene then? Because I grew up in New Jersey, so I definitely knew I love Lifetime. I got into the punk scene when in like 97-ish, and so I was in a band, played shows. I always heard about the Chicago scene, anything in California, Florida, Jersey, because I was living there. I never heard a lot about Seattle from that time. I mean, even I found out about Botch in the mid 2000s, I think, when AP Magazine did a write-up on them, and I'm like, what fucking band is this? And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I was like, how did I not know who this band is? Because I loved bands like Coalesce and sounds like that. So how was that scene when you moved there? Like, who was around you?
It was pretty good. I mean, Botch was definitely, we had Kill Sadie had played with Botch in Minneapolis, so we, didn't know those guys, but we knew those guys. But Murder City Devils was really popular at the time when we first moved here. It was a handful of bands. It really was, it was odd. Like, Kill Sadie moved here, and then Botch, Murder City Devils, and Kill Sadie all broke up like right at the same time, which then formed Minus the Bear, These Arms Are Snakes, and Pretty Girls Make Graves. All the members split into those three bands. 3 bands broke up, and then 3 bands started.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking wild, really. There were some other bands that were going on at the time. Off the top of my head, I can't even remember, but Sub Pop had signed some cool bands. There was a great underground scene. The label that Minus the Bear was on, Suicide Squeeze, David put out a bunch of cool stuff. 764 Hero, Red Star Theory. Obviously Modest Mouse was doing very well already at that time. Some of the pre-Band of Horses bands were around because there were a couple bands, that they had all played in before that and stuff. There was definitely a pretty decent scene already at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously knew about Seattle in the early 90s because the whole grunge thing and Nirvana and Pearl Jam and everything like that. As you're saying, I'm like, oh, duh. Yeah, you're like, oh, yeah, Murder City Devils. Totally fucking forgot about those guys.
Yeah. I mean, dude, how long ago was this?
Yeah, true. This is like 25.
I don't know about you, but I'm 45 years old. I don't know how good your memory is, man.
I'm 45 as well. So, I mean, that's the way. I actually have a really good, I believe I have a good memory. I mean, people could probably fact checks me, but I remember a lot of stuff from back then just because I love music so much. And I think because I was, like, even when I was in a band, I took a lot of photos, so I had a lot of memories from that, and just read a lot of magazines and things. So I think there's like a photographic kind of thing that helped with me remember a bunch of shit. So how does Minus the Bear start?
Again, all 3 of those bands were still happening. There is a bar in Seattle, Washington called the Cha Cha Lounge. Back in the day, throughout the 90s, and then before they moved locations, and it's, of course not the same since they moved. It was kind of the bar that, like, all the guys who were touring worked there because that was a job that, your boss would let you go on tour and come back, right? And so everyone hung out at that bar. I mean, you could call it was like the hipster bar in Seattle, right? So we all hung out there, and it just kind of slowly became this thing where we started all like, oh, hey, good to see you again, that kind of thing. And how really, I would say, Minus the Bear actually started was Corey Murchie, the bass player, grew up with Aaron Turner from Hydra Head Records /ISIS. And Corey moved up here, ran into Dave from Botch, who was on Hydra Head at the time, and basically went up to him and was like, hey, I'm Corey. I know Erin. Let's start a band. Just like totally ballsy move. And they were like, okay. Dave kind of laughed, and he was like, okay. At that time, Dave had been kind of started writing a little bit of different sound. That actually the first Minus the Bear EP ever, there's a song called Lemurs on it. Lemurs, Man, Lemurs. And the opening riff of that was actually proposed as a Botch song, and the Botch guys didn't like it. So Dave wanted to try out this tapping guitar style. And then that joined the 2 of them, and then Matt Bayless. And then they asked me to play drums, and I said no, because I was really just dedicated to being in Kill Sadie. And then Kill Sadie started kind of ending. I knew I had to jump on something, so I jumped with them. The 4 of us got together and wrote that song. And at first they were like, we need a singer. I had known Jake, the singer, from his previous band called Sharks Keep Moving. Excellent band. not super well known. They were on Second Nature. I think they were on Second Nature Records. I want to say that Jake and Matt didn't get along super well, or that Dave and Matt maybe didn't get along super well. But I was basically like, we should bring Jake in because he's a great singer. And it took a little bit of time, but we did bring him in, and that's really how it all started.
That's wild, dude. I mean, was it weird for you to leave playing with your brother since you played in every band you played in was with him?
Yeah, it was weird. Sorry, I apologize. He didn't end up moving here with us. He met a lady and decided to stay back in Minnesota, and he got married to her, and so it was really weird. We had to find the moving here was crazy. My brother was gonna move with us, and then he didn't decide, so we found another guitar player, this guy named BJ Woolette, who lives in Minnesota now, or lives back in Minnesota. He was playing drums in a band called The Stereo.
Hell yeah, yeah.
For a while, yeah. And so BJ ended up actually I don't know if he was still in the band at that time, but he dropped everything and moved to Seattle with us. And then the singer of the band also quit. We knew Steve Sneer, who's the singer of These Arms Are Snakes. We kind of knew him from this tiny band in Iowa that he was in. He was a 17-year-old kid, couldn't even buy his own cigarettes. And I just called him randomly one day. I got his phone number, and I was like, hey, it's Erin from Kill Sadie. You want to move to Seattle with us and be our singer? And he literally packed up his life and just moved out to Seattle with us. I don't even know if the other guys had met him. But so it was really wild.
So when Minus the Bear starts, at this point, you're what, 19? 20?
No, I think I moved here when I was 19. So I think it's 20 or 21. No, I was 21.
Since you had already been touring for a while, did you feel like, fuck, now I got to kind of start all that shit over again? Or was it exciting?
No, it was exciting. To be perfectly blunt, like Kill Sadie was a very unknown band. Like we would go on tour and we'd bust our ass, but we'd play a basement show in front of 7 people. And then that's just the way it was. In my eyes, I'm like, oh, like Botch is a much bigger band. So we'll probably have a bigger, I knew it would grow. And then just even from the first song we wrote, like the poppiness of it, I was like, this could be a thing.
Was anyone in the crowd a little disappointed because you guys all came from these harder bands and then the sound you have is complete 180 from any of that?
100%. I would say every show that we ever played for the first 5 years, people just yelled Botch at us.
Really?
Yep.
I guess I felt like I kind of had my finger on the pulse back then, but I didn't know who the fuck they were. I literally, like I said, it was almost like a decade or so after they broke up where I found out who they were. So, like, were people yelling Botch at you guys when you were on tour, or was that just in, like, the West Coast or Seattle?
I would say not in Seattle, on tour. Yeah. I mean, fucking Botch is a good band, man. Like, it was fine for us. Like, I think the 4 of us thought it was funny. I think Dave was probably, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he maybe had been, a little annoyed by it at the time, but he's probably stoked on it now. They just did a big ass reunion tour, so.
Yeah, I saw that. I feel like you guys literally just created this whole different sound. I mean, maybe people could say like, oh, it reminds me of this, but like I never heard anything like it when I got to know you guys. When you're writing all this music, was it just like, were you kind of like sitting back, not in amazement, but just like, holy shit, we're really onto something here?
I don't think I really understood that we were onto something or that it sounded different until Dave and I wrote the Menos Oso record. I think the beer commercials EP that came out before, they make beer commercials EP, came out a little bit before Oso did. And that was when basically Dave just kind of looked at me and he was like, I'm really sick of playing guitar. And I was like, okay, what do you want to do? And he was like, I think I want to try playing pedals. And so I said, okay. And so him and I sat at our practice space and just got, I guess I can say this out loud, but we just get stoned out of our fucking minds, and he would play a riff and we would sample it into a pedal, and then we would loop it, and then we would come up with another part and another part. And that was when, I think it was during that record, the first few records I feel like are just kind of, or the first couple EPs and the first LP I feel like are just kind of indie rock. I get that the tapping sound was a bit different or whatever, but I personally don't look at them as like anything different.
So when the band's starting off, how long was it before you guys went on tour?
It was really fast. We recorded before we even played a show because Matt Bayless was in the band. We recorded like 2 demo songs. I knew David from Suicide Squeeze, and I played him for him, and he said, here's money, go in and record every song you have. And so we just did. And again, Matt had studio time and Matt recorded it, and so it was nothing to do. We had it at our first show. God, we probably already had a booking agent at that point as well, just because there was, so many members of people were mildly interested in it at that point. I would say we toured within the first year for sure, like right away.
Did you guys get any shit from other bands just because you were able to just progress so fast?
Not that I can think of. I mean, maybe behind our back, or I don't know. I mean, we definitely toured. We definitely the first minimum year, 2 years of Minus the Bear was definitely like it felt like we were still in our old bands. The shows weren't big. The show, a lot of it, we were like lucky enough to get into like really tiny clubs versus some of the other, because we had a booking agent, we were lucky to get into tiny clubs versus Botch and, and Kill Sadie, who were playing more like house shows. And if either of those bands was lucky, maybe a tiny club every now and then. So it wasn't really a huge step up. I mean, we slept on floors. We toured in a van. It definitely was not an immediate success. I mean, the fact that we did all tour, we all wanted to tour was what made the success of that. I mean, we were just, from the time we started until the time I ended in the band, I think the shortest that we toured was 6 months out of the year.
Jesus.
Yeah, we generally toured about 6 to 9 months out of the year for the most of the 14 years I was in the band. After the first year, maybe after the second year, Dave and I rehearsed 5 days a week. We just wrote constantly. We treated it like it was our day job when we were home.
Was it more so to get super tight or just to really figure out what the sound was in advance on it?
It was to write. I mean, we would rehearse before tours and shows like that as a full band or whatever. But for the most part, Menos, El Oso, and Planet of Ice were written by just Dave and I. We wrote all the music. At least half of Pirates, yeah, it was Jake and Corey and Matt when Matt was in the band. They didn't really come to practice until we were ready to present songs to them. It always just felt like a too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. And I had always written with guitar players, and Dave had always just written with drummers. And so, which is not your ordinary songwriting thing when you're in a full band. It just kind of worked out that way. So Dave and I would essentially write songs, and then we would present them to the band, and then they would write their own parts. Help out with arrangement if need be or whatnot.
So Menos El Oso, when you guys were writing that, what was the first song you wrote for that? Do you remember?
Jesus, maybe Hooray? The song Hooray, I think.
Oh yeah, I love that song. Did that record just flow out of you guys like super fast, or did it take months to come up with all the 11 songs?
It was both. Corey, I think what happened at that time, Corey had a family emergency. Our bass player Corey had a family emergency, and Matt was super busy, and Jake just was like, "Hey, you guys write the songs." So I think it took a while because we were trying to figure out what the fuck we were doing. Where I was like, "Okay, Dave, how are we going to write songs if you're not actually playing guitar? Like what are we doing here?" So it took time for us to get into the idea of playing pedals versus playing guitars, and then making cohesive music out of that. But I think once we got it just like clicked. Like I think The Game Needed Me may have been the opening track on that record. I think it was, maybe I'm wrong, but it may have been like that. And then we're like, oh, okay, this is how we do it, and then the rest of the record just kind of flowed from there. It was weird because we were like also touring while we were writing that record. So we'd have to take like writing breaks, and then we could kind of play some new songs on the road a little bit here and there.
Well, I remember because like I said, Pachuca Sunrise, I heard that, and that obviously became like one of the biggest hits for you guys. When you guys wrote that, out of the whole record, that one obviously is, even on Spotify, does the most plays. Did that stand out to you as being like, this is going to be like, I don't know how we're going to have a single because we're not on the radio stations or whatever, maybe MTV, but this is going to be the main song, or did that come later on when like the crowd was like wanted you to play it?
I think it's a crowd reaction. Like we were like geeky, techie musicians, and so some of the more complicated songs were our personal favorites, like The Game Needed Me, or Drilling was one of the ones that, like, I think when Dave and I wrote Drilling, we were like, oh, we're onto something here. Like we knew that. I think Pachuca was, Dave and I just trying to write something that was a bit more songy than bleep gloop. There's not a lot of sampling. There is sampling in that song, but not as much. And I don't know, Dave would sit at home and play guitar, and he would send me a riff, and I would listen to it, and then him and I would work on it the next day, and then we'd just go from there.
So Jake would just come in, and would he write the vocals, or did you guys write, or the lyrics? Or did you guys write the lyrics too?
No, Jake wrote all the vocal parts were definitely his.
I feel like the whole theme of that record is very on a beach in some tropical.
So yeah, that most of that record, including the title, including the album artwork, is actually about our first tour in Spain. I think it was during the Highly Refined Pirates area, like right at the end of that. And you can actually see some of that artwork incorporated in the Beer Commercials EP also. Dave at that time was also doing our artwork. Also mostly was written about us being in Spain. It's kind of this romantic vision of Spain, and some of it's like Pachuca. The funny thing about Pachuca is that actually it's actually wrong. The song should be called, I think it's Peruco Sunrise, and what a Peruco. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. It's when you're in Spain, you lick the side of a cigarette and then you roll the cigarette in cocaine and then dry it out. And then you can bring your cigarettes, and you can just smoke cocaine everywhere you go.
Oh my God.
So that's what a Peruco was. And, I won't, I'll say, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I mean, I'm sober now, so I don't care about talking about my drug use. I was sitting on a beach smoking cocaine cigarettes, and hence Peruco Pachuca Sunrise. We just got the name wrong. And then we're like, whatever, fuck it, it's Pachuca, who cares?
I love that so much. That's fucking crazy. I feel like that album, when I first heard it, all the bands that are around are singing about, and everyone kind of, it was like girls or heartbreak or whatever. I don't know, like when your guys' sound just made me want to go and sit on a fucking beach and like live this lifestyle, like grab a bottle of wine and just chill out. Like I don't know, I feel like that was like the theme with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, drinking is definitely the theme with us, lyrically and off lyrics, just in real life. Yeah, I mean, Jake, I've always, I don't know if you've ever listened to any of his previous music, but I've always loved the way he tells a story. I mean, it's kind of the reason that I was like forcing him into the band at first. He paints a great picture. He writes, he's an English major, he writes like a writer. He doesn't write like a songwriter. I always loved that, and I really thought, even in the very beginning, the narrative that Jake has is different than a lot of other bands, and I've always appreciated that he's a storyteller. I mean, we had a lot of people in the very beginning of the band, taking songs literally, and they're like, "You guys are fucked up all the time, and you're talking about chick," and he was just like, "Hey, I'm writing a story about a guy," it is. But then, some of the stuff was about us. I mean, the pig war that's on that record is about the San Juan Islands here in Washington State, about Friday Harbor, where Jake's parents had a cabin, and we all would go up and hang out at his parents' cabin and stuff. And it's like the pig war is this literal thing that happened on the San Juan Islands at some date. There was a war over a pig on this weird fucking island. And so, he's just really good at painting a picture, I thought. I always think that.
Oh, totally. And his voice is just like perfect for it. It's just like soothing and just really it brings you in. It's not abrasive. It just like fills the space. That's what I thought you guys did. Like you just created this whole like spaciness like around when I put a song on. It just like filled the room between everything.
That's really cool. That's a cool picture to paint, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when that record comes out, did you guys immediately see an increase in ticket sales or people showing up to shows?
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely the turnaround. There was something about after the beer commercials record came out and we toured a little, the EP came out and we toured a little bit on that. There was like, oh, there's like 10 more people here than the last time we played. But what happened really was, and this is, it's like a curse for a lot of bands, but it was a total blessing for us, is we had recorded the record, and then while we were waiting for the record to come out, we went on tour with Stray Light Run, which was John and Sean from Taking Back Sunday. Alternative Press wanted to do some tour with them, and basically John said, we'll only do the tour if you can get Minus the Bear to do it. And and it was like right when the first Stray Light video came out, and John's wearing a Minus the Bear shirt in it, and we were like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, like this is some East Coast shit. What the fuck are these guys doing? And it took a little convincing because, Minus the Bear was not in that AP Taking Back Sunday-esque world. And like, I don't mean that as a negative thing. I just mean that's the reality. We weren't at that point. We ended up taking the tour, which was great. And like, I adore John Nolan so much. And while we were on that tour, the record leaked. So we were doing that tour. And then I think we had a headlining tour planned like, a month after. And while we were on that tour and the record week started leaking, our headlining tour started selling out like way in advance. And so our agent went back and was like, cool, let's bump them to the venue size up from that. And then those sold out.
Wow.
And then the record came out, and, we just went on tour right away, obviously. And that was absolutely like the time where we went from smaller shows to bigger shows.
Was that stressful at all for you to see when it finally works, which doesn't happen for, I'd say 90-something% of bands out there, right? They don't,
at least, yeah.
They don't get to see that success. So when it happens, are you kind of, I don't know, not imposter syndrome, but do you kind of sit back and just like, are you like, fucking finally, this is what I want to be? Or you're like, oh, I'm not ready for this?
No, I mean, honestly, I think it made all of us want to work harder. It made us all want to do more and work harder. And we were very thankful right away. I mean, it was crazy for me at that time. It was like, holy shit, we're playing a show and there's 300 people here to see us. That is fucking mind blowing. Again, 2 years before that, or year and a half, 2 years before that, I was playing in front of 3 people. So it was more than anything. It was just crazy and it was cool. And, we just knew that, we were kind of onto something with the sound. We knew that if we worked hard, it would pay off.
Were people still yelling Botch at this point, or did that start to die down?
I think, probably still at that point they were, yeah.
So around early 2000s, I say this in every interview, like the sound totally changes, comes from the Fat Records punk, and then it expands where people are really getting creative in their sound. And so I thought a lot of bands were really following kind of what was happening, and I felt like you guys just completely stayed away from what everyone else was doing. Was that just because that's the way you wrote, or did you look at other bands and say, like, if you're writing a song, you're like, this is kind of going too much in that direction, let's not go there?
No, I mean, we would always just do whatever felt right to us. I mean, I think one really different thing about the band is that for the most part, none of us really at that point, I would say the time that the band, even a little bit before the time the band started until at least Oso, none of us really listened to rock music. I listened to a ton. I still do. I mean, I'm in a hip hop group now, but I still listen, since I was 14, 15, I've listened to hip hop and I've listened to dance music. And as a drummer, I've always just been super intrigued by what makes you move, like what is it about this beat that makes you move? And when we first all met, we were all just partying a lot, I guess. There was a summer when the band first started. I think it was labeled the Summer of Fun. And we would all just get wasted and go camping and do these huge trips. And it wasn't just the 5 of us. It was like 40 of us. And we listened to Justin Timberlake when that big record came out. And we listened to Daft Punk, and we listened to Kylie Minogue, and we listened to Fortet, and it was just stuff. And a lot of the guys, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of the guys hadn't been super into that world, and we all just opened up more to kind of a dance and pop music thing. And I think that really set some of that first stuff apart. But we definitely kept listening to that stuff through. You can feel the progression. Like there's stuff on Highly Refined Pirates that Dave and I literally stole from Daft Punk. And then when it got to the writing of Menos and Dave wanting to do more of the kind of glitchy stuff, we had transitioned into more stuff like Fortet, Prefuse 73, DJ Shadow, some more of that kind of stuff. So you can always kind of, in a weird way, you can always follow the trend of that band based on what we were listening to at the time.
Real quick, if you're looking for an explainer video or someone to do motion graphics for your company, check out my company, drive80.com, and you can email me at mike@drive80.com for more info. That's all I got to say. So now back to the interview. Oh, shit, that's crazy. So what was the influence for Planet of Ice?
Fun story. We were in England, and we were, God, where were we? Manchester? Staying with a friend, or we were going to stay with the promoter, and the promoter was like, okay, I've got a place for you guys to stay tonight, but I have to warn you that my roommate smokes a lot of weed. And we were like, fuck yeah, he does. Let's go. We went to stay at this house, and we all walked into the door, and there's this guy sitting on the floor just blasting music in this cloud of smoke. And we're like, fuck yeah, we're in. Let's go. And he was listening to Yes, Close to the Edge. And none of us had ever heard that. And all of us sat there and just had our fucking minds blown collectively. We were like, holy shit, what is this? And this kid just sat there, and we sat there for hours and listened to records. And there were bands that came out a long time ago that I never, honestly, I don't only speak again for myself personally, but I never gave the time to, because I would always associate those people. Like, I'd be like, fuck Pink Floyd, because fuck, whatever. All of a sudden, this guy put on the record Animals, which I had never heard. And I was like, this is amazing. So literally from that night, especially Dave and I, but also the other guys. And I say especially Dave and I because Planet of Ice was definitely written, music, I would say 99% of that record Dave and I wrote, just the two of us. And it was listening to King Crimson. It was listening to Pink Floyd. I mean, if you listen to the song Lotus on Planet of Ice, I think it's the last song on that record. It's a direct ripoff of a Floyd song. of a Pink Floyd song, and there's some riffs that are for sure. Dr. Laling is on that record. Is a I'm not gonna say a rip off. It's inspired by. Well, you can call it a rip off. I don't care. By King Crimson, 21st Century Schizoid Man. So it was a pretty big shift for us. It just felt natural.
I feel like that record went a little darker. I mean, obviously, El Oso is on a beach setting, and this Planet of Ice, it's complete opposite. I felt like the sound represented the name of the album.
Totally. I mean, if you ask me what my favorite record is, it's probably that one, and it's solely because it had a vibe before it even had a vibe. You know what I mean? Like it was like we kind of had to work into the Menos El Oso thing just because we were trying something so different with the guitar pedals playing and stuff. And it was a process of learning, right? And for some reason, we got back from that trip, and Dave and I just got in the practice space, the next day, and we didn't even have to speak of it. It just happened very organically. That said, I do remember like presenting some of that material to the band for the first time. And just having like Jake look at us and go, what the fuck? Or, Corey be like, this is great. Like, let's go, After Menos El Oso, Matt Bayless had left the band, and we hired a young man named Alex to play keyboards in the band. Alex was much more of a keyboard player than Matt was. So, I think Alex definitely contributed a lot to that record as well.
It kills me every time I see his name because I immediately change it to Axl Rose when I'm reading
it.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Every fucking time. A lot of bands, I feel, when they start to blow up and they're on the road constantly, that's what they write about. And I feel like you guys didn't do that, but being on the road seems like it had a huge effect on Planet of Ice, though.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Oso, technically, I would say Oso was about being on the road, but it was about, not the parts of playing shows. It was the parts of smoking cocaine cigarettes on the beach, right? We were on tour during that. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know lyrically where a lot of that stuff came from for Jake. I mean, he's still telling stories, but yeah, there's a darker feel to it. I mean, I think I want to say the album title may have already even been in our heads before we started writing it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like, we're going to do this majestic, fucking magical, creative, cool concept record, which is something that none of us had ever done at the time. Like, the idea of writing a concept record seems so far out of anyone's head, but that's what it eventually turned into, I guess.
So what kind of doors open up for you guys for a band that's on tour when you start to blow up? Meaning when you show up to a show or afterwards, where before you guys were huge, like you weren't able to do like these random cool stuff, and then all of a sudden you start blowing up and people are like, hey, do you guys want to go to this party, or I don't know, meet this? I feel like it's a different, you get like to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of that stuff didn't really start happening until the Omni record. We were pretty self-managed most of the time. Like, we had a booking agent. We had tried out a few managers here and there, but it was like at the middle to end of Planet of Ice was when we got management for the first time. And management comes with, hey, let's do this festival. Let's do this fly out. Hey, Nike wants to bring you into the shop to show you guys around, and you can all make your own custom design sneakers, or here, these places want to send you free amps. It was kind of during that time sponsorships started coming in, more of that kind of stuff.
Did that like have any negative effect on the band, or was that just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm trying to think of like, sometimes when that stuff happens, minds can shift a little bit and egos can kind of inflate.
Yeah, for sure. How do I say this? How do I put this? I definitely think that obviously the bigger you get, the more stressful things can get, the more you have to do X, Y, and Z. So again, going past Planet of Ice into Omni. Omni was the first record that we recorded with a producer that wasn't Matt. The first record we ever did, the Brian Pirates, was with a guy named Steve Fisk, but he was a Seattle guy. We knew him. When Omni was, we moved over to Danger Bird Records. They were just coming off the success of the Silver Sun pickups, and Danger Bird was, frantically trying to get some more cool, quote unquote, bands. And so we signed to them, and it was the first time that we'd ever had a record budget. Most of the time it was like Matt volunteering his time. We always recorded at Studio Litho, which is Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam. That's his studio, and Matt had worked with Pearl Jam, so we'd always get it. Everything was on the cheap. all of a sudden it wasn't. And we were able to interview different producers and people that we wanted. And it became more business between those two records for sure.
So I just wanted to point this out. When you guys were on tour for Planet of Ice, I saw you play, I believe it was Irving Plaza, and I forget what it was, but there was a band you were on tour with, and they had a cellist, and they were like really weird. Do you remember this at all?
Murder by Death?
It might have been them, and the crowd just did not fucking like that band at all.
Oh, that's too bad.
Like they were just like really just shitting on these guys, and I was like, these poor fucking guys, man. I just stood out to me because the singer was like, he wasn't singing, he was just kind of like, he was almost like Frank Zappaing it with just like weird sounds coming out of his mouth. It seemed to me like it was pretty known that they were getting shit on at the show. Like, was that the only time that happened to those guys? I don't know. I just had to remember. It popped in my head the other day, today, and I was like, I have to just ask this.
I honestly don't know. I mean, they killed. I mean, they killed a lot of nights. You know, they're certainly a good band. That was it was funny because I had actually done the One These Arms Are Snakes tour. I did a tour with Murder by Death, and then Minus the Bear took them out right after that one. So I just did like 2 tours in a row with them. I honestly, man, I don't remember. It's all a bit of a blur.
Yeah. During this time, there are any tours like super memorable at this time, like before Omni comes out, or right before you guys go and record it, like shows you played or bands you toured with or things like that?
Yeah, we met again through the Hydra Head Boston Erin Turner connection, and then probably just from being around. Piebald asked us to go out on tour with them. We all loved Piebald. They were great. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for us. The 2 big things that happened for Minus the Bear as far as like people supporting us was Cursive took us out right on the Ugly Organ tour, which is how we met. But, the first leg of that tour was Cursive, Minus the Bear, and Cursive, Minus the Bear, and Appleseed Cast. Was that it? And then Engine Down did part of the tour, and then oh god, I can't believe I'm not remembering their name. A really, really great San Diego band, but I'll think of their band name later. But
Drive Like Tate.
No, I wish. I'll think of their name later. I'll remember it later. But those were kind of our big breaks. And then right after the Piebald tour,
No Knife.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful people. God damn, they're so amazing. I still talk to Chris, the drummer, and he plays in Pinback now. And then he has this phenomenal solo record also. Anyhow, it was Cursive and Piebald definitely helped us out. And then we got into, I think after Oso came out or during that touring cycle, that band Braid did a reunion tour.
Hell yeah.
And they asked us to go out. And it was just one of those things where, we just kind of organically grew. The funny part about I think it was we did one tour with Piebald, and then they liked us so much they asked us to come out to do the next leg of the tour with them, which is, rare. That thing doesn't normally happen these days. That tour was My Chemical Romance's first tour ever. So My Chemical Romance opened the tour. It was their first tour ever. This band called Noise Ratchet out of San Diego was second. We were third, and then Piebald was fourth. And My Chem and Noise Ratchet both got signed to major labels on that tour. And Piebald and us were kind of just like, oh, okay, we're the old guys. I get it. It was pretty funny.
Did you meet John Cheese?
Yeah, totally. John's great. Yeah, I love that dude.
I interviewed him like years ago, and he's just he comes up all the time. Like I just did a Limbeck interview, and they were talking about him. He's like the fifth member or something.
Yeah, he's a funny fucking dude.
Yeah, he was telling a story about when he was roadieing for My Chem. He had this like epiphany or read some book, and he's like in the van with them, and he's like, you guys, he was like basically telling them like, this shit you're doing is going in the wrong direction. He basically was like telling them they should change their mind. And then I think Frank and Gerard like took him aside, and they're like, hey, you need to fucking shut your mouth for the rest of the tour. And then they kicked him off. I read that you played drums for Piebald.
No.
Oh, why did it say that? I was confused by that. I was like, I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense.
Oh no, my good man Luke. There was the Piebald second drummer Luke, who's their current drummer. He's been in the band since forever now. Thank God he's in the band. He's so good.
Yeah, there's something online that said like you played with them, or I don't know.
Minus the Bear has played shows with them, and then nowadays I run a thing called the Indie Drummer Collective, which is and Luke is in that. as well. So, Piebald and my name can go hand in hand sometimes based off social media shit.
So Omni, when you get to that record, I mean, I feel like every record you got, I was never disappointed by any record that you guys put out. Every time one came out, I was like, holy shit, these guys still fucking have it. When Omni came out, I like love that record. I got that on vinyl like last year. I think I bought it for like $90 or something.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was like, this is probably one of the only bands I'm gonna do this for. Like, it's like that in rival schools. I was like, all right, I'll pay that much money for this. So when you're doing that, like same routine, like you and Dave get together and write that, or did any of the other members start to collaborate with you?
Definitely, that's when it started becoming more collaborative.
Did you like that or no?
Yes and no. I think a lot of good stuff came out of it. I think there was some stuff. I guess I would say maybe that, like, whereas I said, almost all of Planet of Ice and probably most of, if not all of, most of Oso were written by Dave and I, not lyrics or anything else. Yeah, I think with the addition of Alex getting more comfortable in the band, and like I said, Corey had some family emergency stuff happening from Oso stuff. I think those guys did start coming in a little more, but it was more like Dave and I would rehearse. We would write 5 days a week, and they would come in 2, 3 until we got the producer on board. It's really interesting. I really wonder why they haven't done this yet. So Dave and I wrote a lot of the foundation of all the songs for what's the name of that record? Omni. And they're a lot more, I would say they sound a lot more like Planet of Ice than what turned into Omni. The songs are longer, there's 7-minute jams, there's all sorts of stuff. It was really the addition of adding Joe Ciccarelli, the producer, to the mix that turned it into Omni. So I'm like, there are these versions, there's demo versions of a ton of Omni songs that are not the versions on that record, and I'm always like, why don't those guys release that shit? Just like remix it and fucking release it, guys. I've like scoured around where I'm like, I know I have the demos somewhere. Like I have like an old iPod that I tried to reboot. I'm like, maybe they're on here, but I just don't personally have them.
So Into the Mirror, was that like one of those stories that Jake was telling, or did he like witness that happening?
Jesus, I don't even remember what the lyrics are for that song. I haven't listened to that record in a million years.
It's about like it's like the girl cheating on her boyfriend with a guy, and they like sneak off.
Yeah. I would imagine that's just a story. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any of our friend drama that happened that created that scenario.
I think that's like why I asked that question before, what doors open up for you guys. It seemed like when I'm listening to these songs, there's this party element, but like in a smoky room kind of thing where it's like you guys got to witness shit going on where for me at the time, I'm like, I'd like to see what these guys are like seeing, or it was just, it was just like,
yeah, dude, the tour bus was insane, man. No, we definitely weren't part of any secret societies or anything at that point. Again, I think Jake just was, narrating stuff that he knew, stuff that, there's probably some of it in there. Fucking, what's the opening line? There's a mirror full of cane on the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's probably from a party that we had, who fucking knows? I don't know that for any reason. So don't quote me on that, but it was one of the first times that Jake was having a little bit of difficulty writing and being inspired lyrically. It wasn't like a major case of writer's block, but it didn't flow as noticeably as easy as some of the other stuff did.
That's crazy because that record is awesome. I mean, it seems like there wasn't like you listen to it, you're not second guessing like, oh, they kind of lost a bit of a step. I was like, these guys just keep moving forward with what they're fucking putting out.
Yeah, that was a fucking grueling record process. It was really fucking grueling.
Why?
The producer worked us to the bone in some real weird ways that we didn't really get why he was doing it. Basically, he wanted everything to be kind of captured live without any editing, as far as all 5 of us playing together. And so we would do a take of a song for 12 hours straight. And if one person flubbed one fucking note, instead of literally fixing that one tiny note, which everyone does in recording, right, we would go back and play it again. So most of the version, I would say, most of the actual music, besides keyboard overdubs and stuff, is actually the take of us playing it, which, it was cool because we had the time and money to do that. but it was also fucking frustrating. Joe was really great, but Joe Ciccarelli, the producer, got frustrated a couple times. He quit the project twice, I think. Flew back home to LA. Once was because of us, and then once was because of a studio that we were renting. We had to literally talk him back into flying up to finish the record. It was just weird, and there was some really weird stuff going on in our lives. I think I can't remember when Jackson was born. Jake's first kid was coming up around that era. I met my soon-to-be wife after that, my now ex-wife, during that session. Alex and I were living together, which was really weird. It was great for a while, and then it wasn't great for a while. It was just life started really transitioning a lot during the recording of that record. And it was just really obvious. I would say that my alcoholism was probably getting pretty fucking high by that point.
I'm just going to ask this, you don't have to answer it, but like some people when they drink a lot, they get really happy, and some people get a little bit like just nasty.
No, I was very, I mean, for lack of a better term, and I hate this term, but I was very much a functioning alcoholic. We would show up, I would just be sloppy by the end of the night, that kind of thing. It was the point where I was absolutely every day at the studio, I was drinking at least a bottle of tequila a day. So, it just became part of that stuff.
Did you pick that up just being on the road, just partying, or like did that help like increase or exacerbate that?
Before I moved to Seattle, I drank a lot, and then I got here, and it was just like, cool, we're all at the bar constantly doing what we do. You start playing music, and you get drunk on tour, and then you get to a point where there's just free beer flowing, or it was like I almost made the joke when you asked earlier if there were any like perks of getting bigger, and I almost made the joke of people just give you alcohol and drugs. It just comes with the territory. You walk into a fucking bar and 20 people buy you a shot, you're wasted within 10 minutes. The band is always a party band. Every one of us partied hard a lot and constant. So again, I can only speak for myself around any of that era. I can honestly say that was around the time that I can really note that my alcoholism was stepping in.
I followed Dave on Instagram, and he was talking about he was like 2 or 3 years sober like the other day. So it just got like one of those things where when I listen to you guys, I just felt like you guys lived the songs.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I would say we did. I wouldn't say, again, I don't want to say that those are like direct narratives from our story that Jake wrote, but I can tell you that we were a fucking party band. I mean, everyone that went on tour with us was like, you guys are the wildest band I've ever toured with. Like, I can't think of a band that we toured with that we didn't quote unquote out party. The Braid Minus the Bear tour was in fucking sane. Like, we were out of our minds constantly. And we just bonded, but we bonded through just being fucking crazy and like running down the streets, jumping from hood of car to hood of car, smashing bottles. And, it was like that kind of, it was like a fucking frat party, it was ridiculous, but it was, it was bonding, I guess. I guess I'll put it that way. It was bonding. I love those guys to this day.
I feel like Braid and you guys, I would not expect from the sound that you guys put out that you'd be running down the street, like jumping on cars, like car to car.
It was, that tour in particular, sorry, the word debaucherous is true. Like, it was nuts.
Did you like get excited to go out and tour because you knew you were just going to have a hell of a time?
I've always loved touring. It definitely, towards the end of the band, just because where we were all in our lives, it felt like a lot of work. 3 out of 5 members had kids in the same year. So a year and a half, maybe, like Jake had his kid, and then Dave had his kid, and then I had mine. And, I got to a point the last year or whatever where I wasn't super stoked on going on tour because my kid was just really adorable. My daughter's amazing. But, it was also very fun.
So Animal Backwards, I love that fucking song. Is that Into the Mirror, like the beginning part? Is that Into the Mirror backwards, the music?
Yeah. Yep.
How did you come up with that? Just thinking, I don't know. How did that come about?
It was one of those things. I don't know. Like if you notice, there's this thing that I love in songwriting is when you make 2 songs into one song, and I think from Planet of Ice on, every Minus the Bear record has one of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It came from when I was super young. I got the cassette tape of Genesis Invisible Touch. The joke is I call it a super song. There's 2 songs on that record that are technically 2 songs in the titles, but they're actually just one long song. And let's see if I can do it off memory. Planet of Ice is Dr. Liling into Part 2. That's all one long song. Omni was that. It was, yeah. So Dave and I had been playing all of the stuff for, writing into the mirror. He just hit one extra pedal and then it went backwards. And we're like, well, that's cool. And I just started playing. I think I just bought like an electronic drum set, and I was like trying to incorporate the electronic drum set into my live thing. And so I think I just like instantly turned around and started playing electronic drums over that. I think that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah, I love that doosh, 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 like when it starts going into the song.
Yeah, I love that song. I think it's like creativity-wise, I thought that was one of the highlights of that record for sure.
Oh, hell yeah. That totally stands. I mean, when it came on, I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, this song is like...
There's a few funny stories about that song. So one of them was we're recording that song, and Joe Ciccarelli decides that, I had the electronic drum beat thing. I switch halfway through the song. Like during the last chorus, there's a big live drum fill, and then I go into playing live drums. Joe Ciccarelli didn't like the sound that was on my electronic drum set. So I went to Guitar Center and I bought, and I really apologize if anyone from Guitar Center is listening. He made me buy this like $3,000 drum set because he liked the sounds on this particular one. And I didn't have the money to do it. And we were like, whatever. So we brought it into the studio. I put it on like a credit card. We tried it for a full day. He didn't like any of the sounds on that. So I brought it back to Guitar Center and sold it back to them for a refund. And then we ended up using the original thing that I did. And he was like, hold on, let me do this. He like turned one knob and all of a sudden he liked the sound. And then the second funny thing about that song, and I can only laugh. I can laugh about it now, obviously, but if you notice, that was the first time that Alex had ever really sang anything more than backup vocals. There's a second voice on that song. That was one of the songs that Jake just could not figure out lyrics to write. So I think Alex wrote half of the lyrics for that. But it was really funny because Alex and I were living together at the time. We both met my now ex-wife at the same time, and he fell for her, but she fell for me. And so I ended up dating her, and it ended up being this like weird kind of conflict between Alex and I for a couple months. And some of the lyrics in that song are about that.
Oh, I could totally hear that.
Yeah, it's super funny. So there was like a direct line that my ex-wife said to him, and then that made it into the song. And again, it's funny now. And it was even funny at the time because obviously I married her and we had a kid together, and it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was pretty funny. There was some spite lyrics in that song, Interband Tension.
That's also a balls move to have the producer say, go spend $3,000 on this. And you're like, okay, let me just pull that out of my ass.
Yeah, totally. I mean, luckily, luckily we had made a little bit of money from the Planet of Ice touring cycle, so it didn't like destroy me, but I was bent up about it. I'm like, if I hit one fucking thing wrong and they don't return this drum set, I don't want it. Like I had no need for it. I was like, I don't need this $3,000 fucking drum set.
Were you guys living off the band like at this point?
Yeah, at that point, I think it was pretty much during, I want to say maybe it was during OSO that we were able to quit our jobs just because we were touring so much. Definitely, a lot of people had significant others that were very much footing the bill. But I think it was around OSO, maybe mid OSO, when we were all able to just, maybe even the beginning of it, to be honest, I don't really remember. But we were all able to quit our jobs and live very poorly, but just focus on music.
So leading up to Infinity Overhead, is anything changing around this time? Or, I don't know, are you guys kind of slowing down or maybe like second guessing if you want to keep doing it? Or was that not changing?
No, it was never a question. When I was in the band, it was, we're going to do this until we're done doing it. Every one of us was like, well, shit, I never went to college. So I might have, like Corey and I, for example, never went to college. Like all we did was play music. And so the idea of not being in the band 12 years later, when you're making your money off of doing it, our literal livelihood, right? Jake and Dave had both done obviously Dave's an incredible graphic designer, and Jake had done some other stuff. So it was really obvious that the two of them could go get jobs, but Corey and I for sure not. We did try to just put everything into it. There was no mention of slowing down at that point. But like I stated, life started catching up with us. The kids were born. All three of the kids were born between that record and what's it called? Infinity Overhead? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Jesus, I haven't listened to that record in forever.
Yeah, that came out 2 years later.
So yeah, life started happening to us. More of that kind of stuff.
This is a question I forgot to ask when we were on Omni. Who came up with the concept for the video for My Time?
Oh, God, the guy that directed it, Mike, I can't remember his last name now. He just did a show he had a Netflix TV show that happened recently. I can't remember his name. He was one of the house guys at Danger Bird Records, and we were talking to Jeff, who was the former Cassilis, who's the former president there. he was like, what do you guys want to do for a video? And I think maybe it was Corey or maybe it was me. I don't remember. But someone was like, I don't know, dancing's pretty cool. And then literally, I think it was literally that night or the next day, Jeff was flying from coast to coast and was on an airplane with one of those dancers. I can't remember their dancing troupe now, but they were like the runners up on one of those major dancing shows at that time. So they didn't win, but they were the runners-up, and Jeff just met this woman and came to us. You know, he called us at the end of the flight and was like, you'll never fucking guess what happened to me. So Mike kind of created the color concept thing for us, which is actually the second time we did it, because we did that for the Pachuca Sunrise video also. There's a color concept thing going on, and all of our dads are in that video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but each member of Minus the Bear is represented by a color. And then our dads are playing marbles, and each dad is playing their son's color in that video. So, yeah.
Did they pull the colors from the record cover? Because it's got like the blue, the yellow, the green on it.
I'm sure. I didn't, but I'm sure, yeah. Yeah, Omni was also the first time. It may have been the only, I can't remember exactly, but Dave didn't design Omni. There was a graphic designer in Seattle that Dave really liked. I guess the cover of Planet of Ice was rendered by a friend of ours who makes video games, but the rest of the artwork was by Dave. And then Omni was the first record where he wanted to be hands off with the artwork.
I didn't even know he was he designed stuff for you guys.
Yeah, he did all the Botch design. He did a lot of Harkonnen. He did a lot of stuff for Hydra Head. He did all the Minus the Bear records until then. I've listened to the record that they did after me and then the EP, but I've never held the artwork or anything.
For Voids?
Yeah. It looks like Dave's style, so I would assume it was Dave.
Any I don't know, any songs on Infinity Overhead stand out to you too as an interesting story, like the in an Omni?
Oh, good Lord. I literally don't even remember what songs are on that record. A lot of stuff from both Omni and Infinity Overhead ended up on that B-side record that we put out. I like some of those songs more than I like some of the record songs, to be honest with you. But I think there's some cool stuff. It's definitely, I would say that record is my second least favorite of our records, putting it that way. I think there's some really cool tracks, but as a whole, Diamond Lightning I thought was great. And then that's another super song. Diamond Lightning goes into that song Tosca. That's another one of the three records where I was like, let's do the thing again. But there's some cool stuff. I think lyrically, Heaven is a Ghost Town is brilliant. I think Jake knocked it out of the park with that one. I really, really like Lonely Gun on that record just because it's so fucking weird. And I think Lies and Eyes is really great. I stole that beat from Pied Piper from Run DMC. Missy Elliott reused it in one of her songs. It's a totally famous beat. It's an exclusive hip-hop beat, but I stole it for that, and I think it's great. I love the way it sounds for that one.
So at this point, this is 2012. This is what's saying on Spotify, and I also have Discogs open. You part ways with the band in 2015, right?
Is that right? I was booted out of the band in January of 2015.
Okay, so Infinity Overhead comes out, so that's 3 years prior to that happening. Did things start going downhill, or did it come out of completely nowhere when January happens, 2015?
Yeah, it was a lot of stuff. I mean, that really, that era, that cycle from kind of finishing, we weren't as inspired anymore. I listened to an interview that Dave did a year ago or something, and he put it this really cool way where he was like, when we started touring in a bus, we stopped all listening to the same music.
Oh, wow.
Because when you're in a van, you kind of listen to what the driver wants to listen to, right? And then we would bond over that stuff. And I never really thought of it that way. But I would say that during Omni, again, that's when, but between Omni and Infinity, it's when families started happening and kids started happening and buying houses started happening, that kind of stuff. We weren't spending as much time together, I think, between that. People weren't feeling as inspired. People were feeling a little more burnt out. But, we went out and did it, and we made music videos. The video for Listing is that Jesse Ledoux did, this great Seattle artist, is a video for our kids. That kind of stuff started coming up. And again, I won't speak for anyone else in the band, but I was diagnosed major depressive during that time. I also with a major anxiety issues, and I just drowned everything in alcohol. I can only speak for myself personally during that cycle, but I just wasn't really enjoying life because alcohol is a depressant, and I'm literally trying to battle depression with a depressant, and that never ends well. I started going through some life stuff with my wife at the time, and things just felt like they were changing for sure. I don't know what would have happened had my circumstances, not gone downhill at the end of my career with my affair. I don't know what would have happened, obviously, but for me, it was the time. Like, I don't believe in God, but I'll say that God came down and told me it's time to leave the band. Like, it was either get sober or, literally a doctor told me, like, either get sober or you're going to die. I fought against it for quite a while, and I scared the shit out of a bunch of people in my life with hospital trips and that kind of stuff. And then, there's just a feeling of camaraderie where things start kind of not being so fun anymore.
So did you quit drinking after you got kicked out, or was this like right before?
No, it was after. It was like during and after, I should say. It didn't stick with me, the quitting drinking. I was way too damaged by just kind of everything that had happened in my life around that time, which is, is ugly. Alcoholism is fucking ugly. And it was heartbreaking and really sad. And it took me a while. This January, I will have not had a drink in 8 years. So that's cool. And I actually had a year and a half sober before that. And then, fun story, I was leaving my house to go visit my ex-wife, who's now my ex-wife, because I also got divorced during the process of being kicked out of the band as well. Your life, again, life falls apart when you're an alcoholic. It's going to happen at some point. I was going to, so we had a kid, and we had this whole custody agreement and shit, and I was going to meet her for the first time since we were divorced. And I have like a year and a half sober. And as I am driving over to meet her, I start getting all these like DMs and Instagram that are just like, "Oh, dude, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, huh? And I'm like, what the fuck? And I opened up, someone sent me a copy of, I don't remember what the name of the song was. It was the first single off the Voids record, which is clearly about me. And it was heartbreaking. And then I went and met her. And then that was heartbreaking. And I couldn't handle it. And I went to a bar. I went to a bar and I drank. I ordered a drink. And then this is really what got me. It was out of fucking nowhere. Corey, the bass player, walked in and took one look at me. I had about 2 sips of this drink. He took one look at me and went, "Oh, you're drinking, huh?" And I just looked up at him, and I was mad. And I was like, "Congrats on your new fucking record." And I like walked out the door, like it was that kind of thing. And it was super harsh. Like I said, I haven't had a drink since. But yeah, it was really rough, man. It was super, super hard. And I'm sure it was really hard on those guys as well.
The audience that I have listened to this are pretty much between I'd say mid-30s to early 50s. And I'm sure a lot of people out there drink, and maybe, I don't know, like when you said you went to the hospital, and you don't have to talk about this, but I figured like maybe this is something, if someone's listening to has been on the edge of like maybe trying to slow down or stop, what would be signs for someone to be like, "Hey man, you're doing this too much"?
I tell you, if you're shaking at all in the morning, go get help immediately. I've done a lot of work around this stuff. Like I said, I've been sober. I got sober through AA. I don't think it needs, I don't think everyone needs that. Like I told you earlier, I don't necessarily believe in a God, but I drank the Kool-Aid enough on the spirituality, and it got me sober. So it works for me. It doesn't need to work for everyone. I don't really give a fuck. Just get sober how you need to get sober. I was at towards the end, my last year of Minus the Bear, I also played in this really fucking great band called Hand of the Hills. We put out one record, and that was it. Great record. Really, really cool. It's very, very Zeppelin meets Fleetwood Mac meets some Seattle band. My parents were coming into town, and I was like, I'm going to try to not drink today. And my parents were in town, and they were like, they told me now, they're like, "You look like a fucking wreck." And I tried to drive over to, Hand of the Hills had a show that night, and I tried to drive over to band practice on the other side of town. Because I hadn't drank at that point, I had a seizure from withdrawal of alcohol in my system behind the wheel, and I crashed into a car. I blacked out. I don't remember any of it. And then I went to the hospital for fucking 7 days. And that was kind of the beginning of the end, I would say. There was a couple little other things here and there, but, for anyone that's listening, again, everyone's drinking and stuff is their own thing, and you need to do what you want to do, but it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get better. Sobriety is the best gift that any father or mother can give their kid. And I mean that wholeheartedly. And knowing that Dave is sober now, I would say that he would agree with me on that one. But yeah, it's fun until it's not fun anymore. And, the horrible thing about alcoholism is that it's such a progressive disease, you can be fine 1 minute and then literally the next minute your body is so physically dependent on it that you get shakes and you get tremors, and then you got to keep drinking. And then every alcoholic has the story where when their life is falling apart, where they're like, oh, I stopped telling people I was drinking, or I was hiding booze around the house, or it's all the same. And if you hit that point, like, get help. Like, there's no point to let a fucking liquid depressant control your life.
Yeah, I had Frank. You know the band Gallows?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, they're from England, and I had the singer on, and he just talked about he was like 15 months sober, I believe it was, and he did some. We don't have to talk about this the whole time, but he did some other program that wasn't AA. It was kind of like you step back to just take a break, and then you put yourself back into it. I forget the name of it, but it was just interesting because he was just talking about that. So
yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like, whatever works. I mean, I definitely know AA people that are like, AA is the answer, that's it. And then I don't give a fuck, man. Like, whatever you want to do with your life, it's cool. Like, if you have a problem drinking, get help, whatever that is.
How did you get kicked out of the band because when you said you heard the song, because that comes out a couple of years later?
So again, there was the first 2 years of 2015, 16, I was just struggling with trying to stay sober, anything at all. I, just like most alcoholics do, I kind of, when they're like, I lost everything, right? Like, I lost my wife, I lost my band, both bands that I was in. I got kicked out of both bands on the same day. That was fun. And then child custody came up because alcohol is involved, XYZ. So I spent a year really angry, like really, really angry. We got into some really weird inter band dispute stuff, and I don't want to air any dirty laundry, but it just wasn't pretty for a little while. And I won't speak on their end. I'll only say I was angry, and I recognize that. Going into the second year started to get easier. I started building fellowship. I started financially, getting on my feet. I don't know if you've ever gone through a divorce, but they're not cheap, especially when you get kicked out of, the only thing I've ever done is play drums for a living. And then all of a sudden I wasn't doing that. So those 2 years I just spent, I literally would have to like lock myself in the house because I was so depressed. I was very suicidal. It wasn't easy. It was really, really hard. And then, yeah.
So have you talked to the guys ever since then?
So I before Corey moved out of Seattle, I hit the step 8, 9, 8 and 9 in the AA program, which is the making amends thing. And I knew Corey was I knew he was moving. He had sold his house and he was moving to New Mexico after the Bandits broken up. So Corey and I got together, and I made amends to him, and it was really hard and really sad. And then Dave and I got together and I made amends to him, and I had no idea, but he was getting sober. So he kind of started making amends to me. Very hard. Very, very hard. I've reached out to Jake a few times, and he basically was just kind of like, we're good. I don't really need to talk. Bye. And it's cool. Lives move on. Honestly, Jake and his wife stayed really good friends with my ex-wife. And, I'm sure my ex-wife has had plenty of negative things to say about me, which is fine. She should. I wasn't the best husband. I'll admit that. So it was rough. And then I never talked to Alex. Alex got married and moved to England. He lives over there now. So I've only talked to a couple of the guys. It's not like we talk anymore. I saw Corey looked at one of my Instagram stories the other day. It was Dave's birthday the other day. I texted him and wished him a happy birthday. So, people move on.
Do you think, this is just playing around just with whatever, if there was ever a chance to say in the next, 5 years from now, because usually a lot of time really does kind of smooth shit out. If you ever had the ability, if they ever asked you to come and play a show, would you do it?
They wouldn't. I'll just put it that way. They wouldn't.
But let's say if it ever came about, would you personally do it?
If I could pay my mortgage and and make sure that I was still getting visits with my daughter, then I would, for sure, totally.
But it was like a show, not like a tour or anything.
Yeah,
like that.
No, totally. Again, I have nothing against those guys at this point. I understand that I put them in an awful position. They had to kick out a member of their band. That couldn't have felt good for them. Even though, like I said, there was drama the first year, for sure, there was drama. But I think they, Dave didn't quit drinking for no reason. Again, alcohol consumes people. So I'm sure he had some drama going on. And again, you just lose touch after a while. I don't ever expect anyone to forgive me. All I can do is forgive myself, and work on not displaying shitty alcoholic behavior to other people.
Yeah, man. All right, dude. Well, I'm going to start wrapping this up. I usually end with 2 questions, but I started incorporating this one a while ago. Is there a story you've never told before in an interview that you'd like to tell now?
Good Lord, not that I can think of. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
With the ghost work, right? Like, you guys don't even play. Like, Erin just sends the songs and you guys send them back and forth that way?
Yeah, so Sean, who lives in Chicago, that was in the band Mile Marker. Him and I reconnected at the very beginning of my sobriety. We hadn't talked in years, and he had gotten sober, so we just started. He was just helping me through my first little bit of time trying to get sober. He was like, "Let's play some music. I got some stuff," and so he had sent it over, and I immediately tagged Dustin Perry in from Snapcase and Threadbare, and going back to my early punk rock days. Chris Broach from Braid, the second guitar player of Braid, who sang some of the songs, was initially going to sing for us, and then I don't know what happened. Him and Sean are in Chicago. I think they had some kind of weird falling out. I always had this idea that I wanted Ghostwork to sound. I wanted to have more of for lack of a better word, I'm going to say an emo singer, like a Braid. We asked Eric from Christie Front Drive to try something, and then one other person. By that point, we had already had demos written. Sean really wanted more of a punk singer. I can't remember if it was him or me. It was just like, what about Erin from Seaweed? We've never met him. I got his email address from a friend of mine, and I just sent him an email one night and was like, hey, I'm this guy from this old band, and these are these guys from these bands. Would you be interested in hearing this music? And he wrote me back within a few hours and was like, I'm into it. Let's write. So that's how that band started. We've never all been in the same room together. I've never even met Erin in person. Erin just he's hit a phase in his life where he just doesn't want to play live ever again. So, which is cool. It's good. It's fine. I wish we could. We just put out a second record recently on Spartan Records. I think the record's great. I would love to go out and promote it here and there. My big idea was that we play New York, where Dustin lives, Chicago, where Sean lives, Seattle, where I live, and then San Francisco, which is close to where Erin lives. I was like, let's just do that.
Was there ever an opportunity for you where like a band that was well established and been touring for years and put out a bunch of records reached out to you to be their drummer?
Literally when I got booted out of the band, I was banking on, I was like, fuck it. I played drums in Minus the Bear. Something's going to come up, right? Never came up. I had a lot of people ask me to be in bands, and I've been in probably 4 or 5 bands that you've never heard of over the last 10 years that have put out records or whatever. And honestly, I've just gotten to this point where like I can't deal with being in a band with a wasted person anymore. I don't give a fuck who drinks or what they do, but when it comes to band dynamic and like there's some dude who doesn't show up to practice because he's throwing up, it's like we're all adults and our time is precious these days. And so I played with some people again, and then it would either be an unaddressed mental health issue where I'm like, dummy, just take care of yourself, or things that feel childish to me now, I guess. Not that I'm like some fucking Dalai Lama or anything, but I'm like, alcohol is killing you. You should probably take care of that. And they're like, nope, I'd rather be destructive and lose my life. As Aaron Tate did 20 years ago or 14 years ago or whatever. I play in a new band now that I'm super excited about. We're pretty new, called Lil Lebowski. As I mentioned earlier, I've always been a massive hip hop guy. 2 guys from Seattle named Pearl and Thomas were in a band called Champagne back in the day with Mark from the Blood Brothers, the drummer of the Blood Brothers, and the 2 of them. They did a bunch of touring. They were great, both great MCs. They took some time off after Champagne, and all of a sudden one day, about 9 months ago, they released this song under this new band name, and I was like, this sounds like a fucking Tribe Called Quest. Like, I was like, this sounds like Native Tongues. This sounds like 90s hip hop. And I immediately did what I do now. And I went into my garage and I wrote a drum part over it and I posted it online. And Pearl, who I hadn't talked to, Pearl and I got sober together. He helped me get sober, essentially, is part of our wonderful story of being in this band together now. When I was really struggling with the fact that a musician couldn't get sober, my first 3-6 months, I ran into Pearl, and him and I, he really helped me a lot. So cool story to how that band started. And then Pearl called me and was like, hey, would you want to play drums for us live? And of course, I was like trying to bully my way into the band, essentially. And then we played a show like right away, their first show, my first show, and pretty much on the drive back from Portland, they were like, hey, do you want to just be in the band? And so we've been releasing singles, working on a record, trying to do all that stuff, but it's super fun. Being a drummer in a hip hop band is way different than being a drummer in a rock band. So it's really great. these two guys are just like my brothers. You know, they're amazing.
Why is it different?
I mean, for every reason. Like the style of playing is different. The style of writing is different. Like the style of writing is really different. I just had my head completely blown off by these two, and then the guy that produces us or has helped produce some songs. You know, I'm so used to being in a room with a guitar player and writing songs, and this is Thomas, the guy who makes our beats. You know, sends over a beat, like basically a fully done track that, you know, sounds like a 3-minute hip hop song. And then I listen to it and sit in my garage and try to write. So I'm writing 2 beats instead of me writing the beats that are the songs. But then also just the groove is so different. Like I was so fucking blown away the other day. We were at practice, or we were at the studio, and we were going to mix some vocals on what's about to be our next single. And Thomas just pulled up one of the beats, and everyone was like, what the fuck is this? And then within 2 minutes, Pearl had, the MC of the group, had a hook and just ran into the vocal booth and knocked it out. And they created this. Now I'm just like, how did you guys do this? They did it in like 3 minutes, and it was fucking beautiful. And the song is incredibly good. Like, I haven't even played drums on it yet, but they did the whole track without, you know, and it was this organic thing that just does not happen in rock and roll. Like, no one writes a song in 10 minutes. And so it's totally different. It's incredibly inspiring. Again, I've spent the last 10 years, I've been in some bands that have been really, really great, and I wish that I could have done some more with them. But this is, I feel kind of reborn again. And just my connection with Pearl, like, we're all dads, we all own houses, you know, we all have jobs. And so everyone's on board. Like, this year we're looking for a booking agent, and we're going to try to get out and start touring and stuff. We're all in that. It feels really good. It's the first time I've been like truly, truly inspired from playing music since probably Omni.
That's awesome, dude. This kind of leads into the next question. So last 2 questions. What would you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend or a cause, it could be about both, or you can keep plugging this.
Yeah, I mean, Lil Lebowski is, you know, again, it's kind of where I'm at musically right now. The Indie Drummer Collective is a thing that I've been doing since I started it. Me and Chris Daly from Texas is the Reason started it in 2020. And it was this thing where we both were like, I was like, hey, let's each do a drum cover, and then we'll tag each other in it, and it'll be fun because we both like Sensefield. And so we both did a Sensefield song and released it at the same time. And then Tucker from Thursday and Charlie Walker and a couple other drummers, maybe even Luke from Piebald, came in, and they're like, that's cool. What are you guys doing? And so we agreed that we would do it again with, you know, 7 or 8 of us. And it just organically blew the fuck up from, what was it, July of 2020, maybe April or May of 2020. I can't remember the date now, but there's 156 members now. We've done a consecutive post every month since then. After the first year, when I started really realizing, like, oh shit, like Zach from Jimmy Eat World is here, and Damon from Braid is here, and fucking, I think he didn't join until year 2, but Matt Cameron from Pearl Jam and Soundgarden is here.
What?
You know, it's a really, really cool thing. And I just started really realizing that we could do something with it. I always in the back of my mind thought that it would blow up more, but I'd say we have like 4,000, 5,000 followers. And I'm like, the drummer of fucking Pearl Jam is here. Why don't we have more followers? But at the same time, I don't care. It just turned into this like really, really supportive. During COVID, people were struggling. Drummers were struggling. No one was touring. And it was this like laser point focus that we could all do. And then, like I said, after a year, when I realized that we were reaching a larger audience than I anticipated by some of the members that had joined, we started playing for a different charity every month. Chris Wilson helps me. Chris Wilson is the drummer of Ted Leo and the Pharmacists. He also plays in Hammered Halls and a million bands. He really latched onto the concept, and he helps me find charities, and then we both collectively reach out and try to get people involved. But it's been crazy. Like, we did a theme. So we do a theme every month. We did one of the Go-Go's records, and the drummer of the Go-Go's got on and chatted with us. We did a tribute to Shudder to Think, and 2 of the members from Shudder to Think came on. We did a tribute to The Cure. The original drummer from The Cure came on and talked to us. We've had like all these great guest interviews. We did, so it's not only, we started trying to expand it out. We did this thing called Drummers Talk to Bass Players. There's all sorts of people on that. I think we have a YouTube channel as well, but that hasn't been updated. But like, I talked to Nate from the Foo Fighters, and, you know, it's really, there's some really, really cool shit on that. I need to invest more time into it because it's really great. And we obviously raise awareness and money for good charities. But the last year has just been really hard in Seattle with my work and all that stuff. So I haven't been paying as much of attention to it, but it's great. Anyone that likes it, it's funny. There's people that make these videos that are just like fucking masterpieces, and you're like, I just watched a drum video. Like, I've always thought that was so stupid, but after putting this together, and it's like, it's a sense of community, like we all, whether it's 10 of us posting on a theme or whether it's 50 of us posting on a theme, there's this sense of community between all of us, and that's worth coming together for. And a great example, I just used this the other day, but a really great example of that was, do you know the band Karate?
Yeah.
Karate was playing, what was that festival that just happened? Not when we were young, but no, the Best Friends.
Oh, the Friends.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gavin from Karate posted on their social media and was like, fuck, I don't have any drumsticks. I don't know what I'm, fuck, I don't have time to run and get drumsticks. Can anyone help? I looked at who was on the bill. I tagged 7 indie drummer collectives that were there. Because like I said, there's 156 of us or whatever. And Eric from the anniversary had an extra pair of sticks and just gave them to Gavin. And that's how Karate was able to play. Like, it's just, it's just ridiculous. It's super funny, but it's great. And again, like, I've after Minus the Bear, I fell into social work, and I've been working for a nonprofit doing housing first in the homeless community in Seattle. And so it's just kind of been the making sure that I'm giving back part has really been a huge part of my last 10 years, I guess. It's funny, I differentiate, like, my music life, which is like, let's get on stage, let's get more fans, let's play, let's try to get bigger, let's make more money, let's be successful. Not that your ego is there, but there's some amount, like anyone that's willing to kind of get on stage and shake their ass in front of people and hope that more people come to the show, there's this like thing. And then all of a sudden you're like fucking Narcanning dead bodies back to life on the streets of Seattle. It's the most humbling shit that anyone can go through. And it's just wild, man.
Sam, are you in like downtown Seattle?
No, I actually just moved. I live in, I guess it is technically a suburb, but I live south of Seattle, one city.
When does it start getting like really rainy and shitty?
As we speak.
Really?
The sun's out right now, but it was definitely raining this morning. So the transition is happening right now. It's usually not till like mid-November when it's like every day rains for 4 or 5 months. Yeah, it's certainly doesn't help having depression, being in the dark all the time. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, that must have worked against you a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. So I'll ask the last question. Just stay on when we're done. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Work hard. We've when this comes from the band era, but it also comes from just even like a fucking human standpoint right now. That like with the creation of the internet, with all of this stuff, like people feel like they are owed. They're like, well, our band fucking rules, and we got fucking 14,000 plays on this thing. And I'm like, cool, go out and tour. Like there's just the work ethic isn't as there, or they're like, oh, I couldn't possibly get in a van. I couldn't possibly sleep on a floor. It's just like, then, do the work, right? Like there's always those people who can blow the fuck up just from blowing the fuck up. I mean, My Chemical Romance, right? We took them on their first tour, and then within 6 months, they're one of the biggest, like, that shit does happen, but like if you want to do work, you get on the fucking road and do work.